Welcome to Shift Delirium, a podcast about junior doctors and the world that surrounds them. I'm your host, Victoria. I'm a junior doctor here in England. I just started not too long ago. And this podcast is really just a way to find out what it is we talk about. How do we spend our days? What is it that led us to where we are? And how does it influence our practice? This is our inaugural episode. I know there was a bonus episode as well, but this is the first episode that we have in this season officially. It's called The Global Citizen, what it means and how we apply it to our lives. In this episode, I'm joined by Tom and Urooj, and they're going to tell us a little bit about their experiences abroad. I'll also chime in a bit, and I hope that you enjoy it. Welcome to our shift.
So hello, my name's Tom. I'm one of the doctors at the hospital, same hospital as Victoria.
Hi, I'm Urooj. I'm also one of the doctors that works with Victoria.
Okay, welcome to Shift Delirium.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so I guess to start, how would you all define the global citizen?
It's not really something I've thought too much about, but I guess someone who's quite outward looking in terms of sort of their place in the world and their country's place in the world. Perhaps someone who's lived in different countries, or at the very least sort of travel to different countries.
I think it might depend on the person. Someone who wants to get involved in different cultures, different countries, wants to help out maybe all around the world.
Yeah. So I did global health before medicine, as y'all know, and one of the big things that we spoke about was like, what's the difference between international and global? Because people use them interchangeably, but like they're very different because one centers yourself and like your country as like the standard, and then outside of that being like international, right? Whereas global is, as you said, Urooj, like it's multicultural. Essentially not saying that like I'm doing international health because I'm leaving what I know, but I'm just working in a different community. So global can be local, like it could mean working like in areas where there's like health disparities and stuff like that. So anyway, so my impression of a global citizen is basically someone who's open to the world around them, whatever that looks like, and that might be just like working in a different part of town with like different people working, or it could mean like, you know, being on a different continent.
So it's interesting. So to you, global can be quite a sort of local meaning word.
For sure.
I think it just means worldwide.
Yeah.
So where have you all been globally? Where have you visited, lived?
I think my best ones were in Africa.
Oh, I didn't know you've been to Africa.
I love it. I would go every year in a little village in Tanzania called Iringa. Absolutely my favourite.
Amazing.
I used to work in a hospital which was run by kind of nuns who self-taught themselves medicine. I would treat the community. It was a beautiful experience. It was lovely. They taught me a lot.
What took you there?
I don't know. I've always been interested in charity work. I think I was just kind of going around helping. I just stumbled across something which I found interesting, and I was like, I want to be part of that.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Did you go in med school, in high school, or whatever, secondary?
I think it was like second year of med school. Yeah.
Very, very nice.
But then ever since, I've been there every year.
How long do you tend to stay for each time that you go?
So during med school it was quite easier because I was going through Christmas periods, so it'd be a nice holiday where I could, you know, take out and you've got a good few weeks to spend there. But nowadays it's a struggle, so I don't know how I'm going to have, because previously I'd go for a month. I don't know how I'm going to do that because we don't get that many holidays.
We don't have that much time off.
We don't have that time, yeah. So still haven't been this year, so I don't think I can this year because of COVID.
Do you think you're going to work in a similar setting in the future, or?
My absolute dream, so you know I'm interested in plastics, but after I sorted my career out, I was like, I wanted to move abroad, set up a little, like, I don't know, a little hospital, a little school, something. I know it sounds far-fetched, but I wanted to get involved in that. But then, I don't know, I felt like you get married, and then you're like, okay, how am I going to do that? And then with children, I'd love them to be that type of person, but I think they need to decide for themselves.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, as much as like there's free will and stuff, like I feel like our parents really shape everything about us. Like I always say that my parents did an excellent job of brainwashing me because like I'm pretty much exactly who they wanted me to be, even though I fought it tooth and nail, but like they won.
Well, perhaps as time passes you'll realise just how much they managed to brainwash you.
Like fully, like in every single way, like life, my work life, friends, home, like everything, they have been very successful. And I didn't realize that at first until, I probably realized that when I was like 20. But 10 years later, I'm like, oh, darn, you guys killed it.
But don't you think, I think it's got something to do with, how you nurture someone, but also culture. So once you bring them up from a baby and you teach them this is right, this is wrong, they learn those concepts.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair. Have you been to any other places abroad that you feel strongly about?
I think that's where I fell in love. But there are a few other nice places.
Very nice. Tom, do you want to tell us about some of your travels?
Sure. I think in general I've been less selfless with my my travel abroad. But I've been lucky. I managed to visit quite a number of places. I've been to South America, different parts, a few times. Been to sort of Southeast Asia, things like that. A lot of travel within Europe. When I was at med school, probably the most interesting, most appropriate thing I did was working for my elective in Cuba, which is a quite an interesting sort of health system compared to sort of over here. Obviously, it's much sort of lower resource, but manages to get sort of outcomes that are pretty similar to sort of Western, the Western sort of developed countries and things like that. So seeing how that worked in an environment that you might not sort of quite expect it was very interesting.
Can I just share the story of how I learned about your like bilingualness?
If you want to, sure. I wouldn't go quite that far, but
no, I would
get by.
So I don't know, I must have said something about me speaking Spanish or something, and we worked on a gastro job together, and like it was just a casual day, like doing discharge letters, just the usual regular humdrum of like being a junior doctor. And then Tom, I feel like it was slow motion, maybe it wasn't, he turns around in slow motion and busts out with this like paragraph, maybe 5-paragraph essay, I'm not sure, in Spanish, like not stumbling at all. I had no idea he spoke Spanish. And he was like, oh yeah, casual, no big deal. I'm also fluent in Spanish.
I'd just come back from South America then, so I was pretty, I was a bit sharper than I am now. But
killed it. Like, because when people say they speak Spanish, they just mean like, hola, ¿cómo estás? And it's like very not, it's unimpressive, quite frankly. But I was shocked because you don't expect that, especially in England.
Yeah, no, we don't set the bar very high in England for learning other languages. But it was all related to that, really. So I started sort of teaching myself to speak Spanish around the time, like before going to Cuba, because that was what I was aiming for, that I wanted to sort of be able to get by. So I sort of worked on it for about a year, and then so like going somewhere is obviously like it's the best way to learn. So like being there for the first half of the trip, which was about sort of 4 or 5 weeks, I didn't really speak English at all, and obviously it was very hard. It was very big, like sort of like learning curve initially. It's very different trying to sort of learn words and then actually sort of having them there, the recall sort of thing. But I think that's where I sort of managed to learn, and since then I've been away for a few other periods to places that speak Spanish, to sort of build it from there. It's something that I quite enjoy now. I've got to a level where I can speak to people when I'm away, and I find it very rewarding. So
you're
I'm very glad
like
it's
amazing,
genuinely like fluent. You know what I mean? You've got the ease because
don't test me.
No, because it's like with Spanish and any language, I imagine like really it's about having comfort when you speak it and like not grasping for words, because even in English there are words we don't know when we use like context clues or like speak around it or whatever. But like you just came out with it, and I was just so impressed, honestly. I'm like, yeah, like, no big deal. You're so, like, chill about it. So obviously I told everyone that he speaks Spanish. And so what inspired y'all to go to these places? So, like, you said a little bit about looking for different experiences, and you kind of stumbled across this place in Tanzania. And you said you went to Cuba during your elective. Why did y'all choose these places?
I think it was just me testing the waters and going a few places, and then you just find somewhere where, I don't know, you feel at home. I think that was...
What is it that made you feel at home? Was it the people? Was it like the food?
The people, they're so beautiful. I mean, I've never met such lovely people. I mean, it sounds so bad, but it's so welcoming and so just open. It was really sweet.
And you, why did you choose Cuba?
So I was thinking I wanted to go somewhere that spoke Spanish because I could use it as like an excuse to learn. And then, it's Cuba. There's nowhere else like it in the world, I think. That's what I thought before, and that's what I think now still after having gone. It's a very sort of unique, politically, the way it's been so isolated from other countries, and has been on sort of a different path, I guess, for quite a while. So, while it's not completely alien or anything like that, there's a lot of differences to sort of the rest of the world and other places that I've been. So it was partly that I was intrigued by sort of what it would be like to visit somewhere that had sort of been on its own path for a while. And then also, I guess, like from the medical point of view, the Cuban regime especially makes a lot of that from sort of much like lower resource they're able to sort of meet the health needs of their population very well. They have lots of doctors per population, and they have sort of all the treatments that you'd expect over here. They have all of that over there. It was basically just trying to see how that was organised and how they were able to do that sort of thing and meet that sort of demand, with so much less resource than they do sort of in other countries. So there was a few reasons why it sort of intrigued me from the outset. So.
And what, like, just sort of piggybacking off of that, what would you say was like the biggest difference between like the NHS and I don't know what Cuba calls their NHS, but like just really socialized medicine, their approach to socialized medicine?
I think there was a couple of like main differences. I think so in Cuba everything was like hyper local. So you'd have these city blocks in Havana, and every sort of 3 or 4 blocks or something there'd be sort of a small, like the equivalent of like a GP surgery, like a primary care, sort of very small place with just like one sort of family doctor, like perhaps one nurse working there. And the emphasis, I guess it is the same everywhere, but very, very much so the emphasis was all on prevention there. So it was all about trying to manage modifiable risk factors for heart disease and things like that. So people will, like all of the people around there would go in, have their blood pressure medications altered and things like that. So a big part of it was trying to promote sort of healthier lifestyles and then primary prevention of diseases and things. I think the other main thing that they had, which meant that they could sort of punch above their weight a bit, was just the numbers of doctors. So it's a reasonably poor country by sort of global standards, but university education is free for everyone. So if as long as you sort of got the grades or anything like that, anyone, regardless of backgrounds, could study medicine at university, and they had sort of quite a big like intake of people. So they have quite a lot of doctors that are able to work sort of for them at the end. One of the things that was sort of very interesting about it, I often mention, is you have all these doctors, which every other country, they're very sort of financially well rewarded for it. So in other countries, doctors are reasonably well paid, professional sort of people, things like that. But the wages were so low in Cuba. So like a doctor, like a hospital doctor, a hospital consultant, would only earn like the equivalent of just over $50 a month. And
wow.
and I was paying sort of like $20 a night maybe for the room that I was staying in. So it created a very sort of unusual, like 2-tier economy sort of thing. But I think that's one of the reasons that they're able to do what they do, is because they have so many doctors and they manage to get so much mileage out of them.
I guess my question is, you take out money. Well, I don't know if the $50 will go far, or however much it was. I don't know if you said dollars or pounds, but whatever. The 50 entity, does that go very far or not very far at all?
Not particularly far. I mean, I guess it's different things that are aimed at tourists or people visiting, are priced differently. But so like a drink in any bar would still cost about $1 or something like that. So $50 would last longer there for sure than it would over here or something like that. But it's still not a particularly large amount of money over there. Another thing that was interesting is a lot of the doctors would have second jobs, often something that was involved in like sort of either tourism industry or something like that, because tourists bring sort of money from outside, which goes a lot further. So there were doctors that I heard about who were taxi drivers, sort of in their sort of spare time. It's like a second job. The family I was staying with, they were both lawyers. Again, it's like a similar sort of, usually like sort of quite a professional, like well-paid job in like in other countries, but their main source of income by far was by renting rooms out to sort of to travellers like me. So
that is very interesting. Because I just wonder about like what even, not that obviously everyone who goes into medicine on some level wants to help, but the paycheck certainly does not demotivate. So like that's part of the incentive, if we're honest, I think everywhere across the world.
For sure.
So that's very interesting that they still have that many amount of doctors.
Yeah, it's quite hard to finger on exactly, but I think university being free must have a big impact on that, and I feel like there probably is perhaps a bit more of a sense of duty there than there perhaps is in other countries. The sort of billboards about the revolution and things like that are pretty widespread and things like that, and I'm sure it's like everywhere that people are a little bit cynical about that sort of thing, but I think people would want to do their bit a bit more perhaps than they would in other places.
That's interesting. Okay. Are there any things that were sort of very unique in your experiences, other than, that it's like self-taught nuns, but which is quite like
I wanted to ask about that actually. With the nuns being self-taught and things like that, was there anything that was particularly different that was happening there that compared to sort of practice over in the UK or anything?
So it's okay. Well, they've got some kind of abroad doctors coming by to help out. The most unusual stuff I'd say was kind of mental health. Their way of diagnosing mental health was not how I would want to be treated or diagnosed, but I think that was very interesting.
So what did they do? What was different in terms of mental health?
So one of the patients, how they were trying to determine whether they were psychotic or not, the test they used was not right. I think I would be classed as psychotic.
What was the test?
It was the patient was probably a bit confused. I don't know, quite young, but it was basically 5 nurses restraining a person. So one holding one arm, the other holding the other arm, one holding a leg, the other holding the leg. The 5th person would open the legs apart, and if the patient tried to close their legs, they would be deemed psychologically not fit. That's as far as I go.
You'd be picturing that, you would be tempted to close your legs.
I would.
Yeah.
I definitely would.
Although, are the nurses nuns? Because I might be a little more trusting if they're nuns and
But in a hospital setting, how do you know if they're nuns?
I know. I don't know. I think mental health is so interesting because it's so culturally defined, you know, like, whereas blood pressure or like other things that have like exact markers, we have cutoffs, we have guidelines. And there are guidelines for sure in mental health. I definitely don't think that fits into anyone's guidelines.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because like what is normal is like, you know, it can just be totally, like in Ghana, we have a lot of like madmen, right? Which now I think are probably like loads of schizophrenic patients or people who have various forms of psychosis, and like they often roam the streets and don't really do anything. And not to say that it's good, but like as compared to the States where you see a lot of criminalization of mental health, many of those people walking the streets would be in jail.
Yeah.
Not for committing any crime, but just because it makes people uncomfortable. Although similarly, people in the States would be receiving medication, hopefully, if they're able to be compliant, whereas medication's not as accessible. So like you're really not going to go to a mental institution unless it's dire or your family like can pay for it in Ghana as compared to sort of other places. But yeah, I think regardless of where you are, that sort of assessment probably needs a little bit more scientific backing.
Agreed.
Peer-reviewed studies.
Because I just remember standing there and being like, no, but I would do the same.
For sure.
I would absolutely do the same.
I would get violent. I mean, I'm not saying that I endorse violence, however.
Yes, but it's that act of restraining someone. Anyone would want to fight back.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so let me ask another question. Have you had any life-affirming moments abroad? While y'all think, I'll tell y'all mine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So when I was doing my master's, I talk about it a lot. I was in Ghana, in this village, and there was this little boy who was walking, and my research assistants were medical doctors. The doctors did like an A to E assessment of the patient, and he was like, oh, like I'm gonna come back and like you take these pills and you're gonna feel better. I was like, I want to be able to do that. Like, look at someone, ask a few questions, like poke and prod a bit and come out with a solution, then that's totally worth it. And like from there I was like, fine, I'm going to go to medical school. So you've had time to think?
Yeah, I can think of an example. So I went travelling to sort of some countries in Southeast Asia a few months back. So sort of around Malaysia and Borneo and the Philippines, things like that. And so we'd arrived in the Philippines, in Manila, which is so quite notoriously quite an impoverished city. And so we'd spent the day there, and I think I guess the reputation was reasonably deserved. So we were going around, and there was a lot of, perhaps more than I've ever seen. I've been away into sort of Brazil and things like that, but there was more sort of obvious poverty and like people that were very much sort of destitute, and sort of street children and things like that. And it was just a feeling of sort of helplessness in all of that, seeing so much, you know, so many things that seemed sort of so sad and so hopeless in a way, and not being able to do anything about it. And it was, and so you have, like, from your point, you're away and you're in a country you don't know, so you feel a little bit sort of like exposed. You feel, or I felt a bit, and you felt sorry for the things that you were seeing, and then just sort of a bit sort of helpless and things like that. So later in the evening, sort of when we were sitting just having some drinks somewhere, you know, it just made me really think about sort of the things that you take for granted, perhaps, and that everyone sort of in more developed countries is guilty of. Is just the things that you take for granted. You know, there are all those people there, and you know, I can just leave that life and go and have a drink at sort of the top of a hotel or something like that. But it's important to recognise your privilege in the world, and to realise that there are things that you can do and things that will never be a problem for you, that just aren't the case for sort of a huge amount of people. So I think it was from that point, I always wanted to be more conscious of sort of the privilege that I had, not take the things that I had for granted, and I guess that's how I felt in that moment.
Very interesting. And did it change your experience while you were there after that? Like when you had that moment of realization, did you
I think so.
sort of move differently?
Partly. I think it's important to remember, when you go away to these places on holiday, you can become a bit sort of focused, on yourself and your experience and, what you're doing and doing all these great things and visiting these places. And but it's important to remember that doesn't exist separate to sort of the country and the problems that the country has. So I think it did make me more aware of the problems that the country must have, and that it's important not to just sort of gloss over those, perhaps.
Love it. That's excellent. What about you, Urooj?
I think my one stemmed more from the UK. It was my high school teacher in, I think, year 8. So I was a very quiet person. I would never speak up. I'd like to stay in the background, and I'd like to do my own thing. And I loved my sciences and I loved my art. Like, they were my two passions. And this teacher basically kind of said, Urooj, if you don't fight for yourself, if you don't say something for yourself, nothing will ever come of it. I can see your passion, but nothing will ever come of it. And I don't know, she just sparked this thing in me, like, do you know what, if I want it, I'm going to have to go and get it. And I think that's what, I always loved education, like my sciences and stuff, but I never felt like I'm going to achieve anything from it. I'm just like the little Asian girl from the side who you just ignore. So I think that kind of opened up my eyes to, okay, wow, like I can do something for myself. And then I realised, you go abroad, you go to all these different countries, you see so many females who aren't in school, who are married early, or doing things that they should not be doing. They should be enjoying their lives. And then it kind of makes you think back about your childhood, the games you were playing and what they're doing. And I just feel like they just need that direction. And they get that direction if someone provides them with that opportunity. And someone needs to be able to give them that opportunity. And there's not many of us that do. And so and we should all do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I got involved in this sort of stuff.
I think that's really important. I think both of y'all are sort of touching on a really similar sort of theme that, like, we don't really exist within bubbles, and, like, we are where we are because of opportunities that were provided for us. And I think it's, like, very global citizen-y to sort of think about, like, the impact of our experiences abroad. And, like, for you, it's like being cognizant and being aware. And for you, it's like being cognizant and aware, and also it sounds like making a pledge in a way to, like, providing opportunities for people that are, like, in different cultures and different communities, which again can be local. Like, it could just be going to, I don't know. I don't really know the UK, but whatever. Like, there's loads of places, I'm sure, where people just don't get those opportunities. And, like, we're definitely in a very privileged position to be able to, like, maybe one day provide those opportunities. Okay, let's take a quick break. Reflection, November. Today, my senior, I won't say what level because it doesn't really matter, stopped everything that he was doing in the ward round to tell me where to put the date and time on a piece of paper. It was at that moment that I thought to myself, good thing that I spent almost a decade of post-secondary school education to learn where to put the time and date on a paper. Anyway, let's keep at it. Okay, let's get back to the show. What is something that you would advise for people who haven't been abroad and maybe don't want to, or maybe do want to? What's a word of advice you have?
Live. Live, but be safe. Yeah. You don't know until you've kind of stepped out and actually explored. You never know how tasty someone else's food is.
Ooh, we love taste.
Very unusual. And you know, just the way people kind of behave with tourists, sometimes it's so lovely. And culture is intriguing, and it's nice to get involved in it.
Love it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's a privilege really to be able to travel, to be in a position, I guess, that you personally can go and see other places, and I think no matter what good experiences or bad experiences, it gives you a different perspective on your own life, your own country, what you know, and to the rest of the world. It's learning about the world.
Love it. I guess my advice would be, I know I asked a question, I didn't have a formulated answer, but
On the spot.
Okay, so I guess my advice for people traveling abroad is to try and live as authentically as you can. So sometimes when you're abroad, there's like a stigma against being a tourist, so you don't want to do the touristy things. But like, it is a new experience, it is a new country. You're allowed to take photos of like the Statue of Liberty or whatever because it's new to you. But also there's so much like beauty in experiencing the culture as people from there experience it, which is also quite difficult to do in short stints. But if you're able to spend a couple of weeks, like, or a month or months, even better, because you can see like, where's the joint that the local people go to? Like, how do you guys like your fried chicken or whatever? Like, what drinks are the like best ones here, or your plantains? Like, all of those things are very important. And I think if you're going to travel abroad, if you're going to spend the money and you have the time, like, you might as well try and get the most authentic experience that is. Are there any lessons that you've learned abroad that you would apply towards your practice in medicine?
Love people like they're your family. You see that a lot. It's quite nice. It can make you feel sad a bit, but that's how I'd want it.
That's good. What about you?
So I guess going back to sort of the local arrangements that I saw in Cuba, it's perhaps thinking that the little things do matter, and like the devil is in the detail. Perhaps is that if you encourage people to live healthy lives, like healthy, happy lives, then their burden of disease will go down. So I think it's, I guess, a bit cheesy, but thinking about sort of a person holistically, and perhaps it's quite easy to forget about it sometimes, especially in the hospital when we're sort of diagnosing, giving treatments, coming up with a plan, getting people discharged home. But keeping people living sort of healthily and happily is, they won't need to see you as often. So the importance of that.
Yeah, my advice or whatever, or not advice, but how it's informed my practice, I think having like seen hospitals in the UK, America, Cyprus, Peru, Ghana, I think I've seen quite a wide variety of approaches to
Sounds
medicine.
like it, yeah.
But I think my lesson is to like approach everything according to the culture in which it comes from, like respecting people's practices. I know I complain a lot here in the NHS, like, if I was in America, we'd be doing this. And I know people get tired, and like, I don't care. But
But you're saying don't do that.
But no, like, I can express myself, but also I have to respect the fact that like, this is the NHS, so like, things are different here. Medication options are different. And similarly in the States, I can't expect them to always go with maybe something that might be cheaper or utilitarian, because you have to worry about lawsuits and things like that. And then like, obviously in developing countries, everything is very different because it's resource limited. So I think for me, when it comes to practicing medicine, it's really important to try and understand where people are coming from, what they think is normal, like even the whole like mental health thing, and not trying to force my opinions or approach to medicine on them. All right, y'all. So just to finish up, I'll ask a question that I've been asking everyone. We get a lot of like, as junior doctors, you get frustrated, you get burnt out, you get sort of over it. There are days where you sort of wonder, like, is it worth it? So far, has medicine been worth it to you? If not, that's okay. If yes, then, that's also okay.
Yeah, so for me now, this would have been different if you'd asked me a couple of years ago probably, but working as a locum, so having sort of more control over the hours I do and things like that, at the moment I couldn't see myself doing anything else. So I'm very happy that it's the job that I do.
Excellent. And what about you?
I'm very sorry to upset you, but the answer is no. It will be better, I know. So medicine for me is my journey towards what I want, and that's to be a surgeon. And I want to be able to treat people medically, but I feel like as a lot of the jobs as a junior doctor you're more like a glorified secretary rather than a doctor. I want to go in and, feel the patient, understand why I would do this and treat that. And sometimes I feel like maybe I'm just following someone else's plan. And absolutely, I'm not ready to make all those plans myself. But I feel like a little bit of leeway under guidance would be good. And a lot more like practical stuff would be lovely. But yeah, no, I do come in sometimes, especially with this whole COVID situation. Sometimes I just think, why am I here?
Yeah.
I genuinely think that, and I remind myself that I'm here for to reach to my final destination.
Yeah.
And I will, it's just about working through. Some days are good, the teams are lovely, but the work is not amazing, unfortunately. I think you might feel it a bit differently because you're a bit more senior than I am.
I think that does play a role significantly.
Yeah.
I think, well, I might be wrong, but I would hope that a few years down the line, you might feel slightly differently especially about the sort of day-to-day work that you were doing. And I think it is tough, especially when you start, and the stuff that you're doing, you're not quite sure about sort of what it is that you're meant to do, and you can't quite see how this is benefiting sort of people when you're not, you're not using your own brain and making decisions and things like that. But I think those are all things that you're able to do a bit more frequently.
I just feel like we don't learn as much as we should be. I feel like, I don't know why, but we don't learn medicine how we should. I don't know, it's just that feeling. I don't know if you guys have had it, but I feel like I don't learn.
I think in the NHS especially, because there's a lot of demand for sort of service provision over, perhaps at the expense of time for teaching or time for people to sort of be allowed to get on with it.
It's more about flow.
It is. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not perfect, for sure. There's a lot of things about the NHS especially that could be improved upon. But I think, for me anyway, they're things that I'm, at the moment, happy enough to, the benefits outweigh the costs.
Yeah, for me, I mean, overall, I would say yes, because I spent a long time to get to this point, and at least, however slow it may be, like, I'm still doing what I want to do, which is like helping people feel better for things that are like fixable in a short term or a short time frame. That being said, I absolutely get very frustrated with the NHS. Like, as I spoke before, me always complaining, like, the training systems are totally different back home as compared to here. And so it's very, very frustrating because, as you all have said, I think the focus is on service provision, not training. But I know eventually I will be where I want to be. And will that be in the UK? Probably not. But, we'll get there. And, like, even as frustrating as it is, I'm still learning so much. So, like, it's much delayed, though. Like, as in, what I'm learning, I feel like I should have learned months ago, maybe. But it's okay. Like, I'm here for a reason, so.
I think there's something that comes with like looking back as well. Like every day you might not see, you know, that you're learning anything. But when you look back after a year or two and you think about things that you perhaps struggled with at that point and then, you know, no longer struggle with or no longer bother you, I think you can see that you have learned and you have progressed. But I agree, you know, day to day it can be hard to see that.
Yeah. And like, don't get me wrong, the NHS is great. I fully support it. I fully like think that it's not realistic to have anything like that in America at all. But it's just nice, especially with COVID going on, like people actually being able to come in without leaving with like bills and stuff. Even though I feel like I'm just sort of doing a job that maybe anyone could do, which is expensive. Like looking at my debt load, it's very expensive. But at least I'm still contributing in a way. So like, I guess maybe I should just go to Cuba. What's the difference?
You wouldn't get paid as much.
Anyway, that's fair. I do enjoy my things. Okay, last bit. What is the best part of your shift today? And or your most recent shift? It doesn't have to be today, but recently. And what was the worst thing that you had to do?
It's a difficult question. I think it's definitely not the worst thing that's happened in a long time, but especially like now I'm a few years down the line, it's very frustrating to try and enact plans that you don't agree with or that you think like a senior hasn't thought about enough or is taking the easy rather than the right option. So I think that's always something that I find difficult to deal with. The best thing, it's difficult. There's a lot of, I find, especially on busier days, there are bits each day that are very good and also very bad and sort of cancel out somewhere in the middle. It might sound strange, but I quite, a bit of the job that I quite enjoy and I think that I'm good at is speaking to families, even if it's about sort of difficult topics, and being able to explain to somebody and to bring them round to your way of thinking about something that's quite complicated and, you know, obviously deeply emotive for them is something that I not take pleasure in doing, but I take pleasure in doing well. If that makes sense. So perhaps that.
Very good. What about you?
My best has been clapping for my patient who's going home after COVID.
Oh,
Survived ITU and everything. So that was quite nice. Worse? I don't think I have a worst.
excellent.
Yeah.
Very good.
Can't pick.
Can't pick. Discharge summaries.
My best today, well, I'll just start with the worst so I end on a good note. Worst was a patient who was desaturating and like just thinking about a couple months ago when COVID first started coming and you just see all these patients who all of a sudden can't keep their oxygen. It was just really sad. Like, even though things are getting better overall in the hospital, it's like, oh gosh, here we go, because they're so with it. And then you have to tell them that they're like dying and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm a little short of breath, but like your lungs are failing you. So that was a challenge to recognize that was happening. Best part of the shift was helping to arrange like a FaceTime between him and his family so that they can say goodbye, which is quite sad, but it's nice that at least there's some form of communication because, you know, in your last days you want to think about who loved you most, and it's usually your family. Anyway, thanks for doing the podcast, y'all. Any final thoughts or...
I hope it was interesting.
It was.
To listen to, but
yeah, I learned a lot about y'all, and yeah, this was lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope you all enjoyed our first episode of Night Shift Delirium. Again, I'm Victoria, your host. I hope this season that you get to see and understand a little bit more about what it is we do and why it is we do it. When we started this podcast, the idea was to just record what it is that we talk about when we're on call. It's grown into something much bigger and much greater than that. I've gotten the opportunity to interview people that I admire, my friends, my colleagues, people that I look up to, people that are maybe look up to me. I hope that you can see this big, vast world of medicine and the people that comprise it. So much of medicine is more than the doctor or the nurse or whatever. It's experiences that we have with patients and with people throughout our lives. I hope that you guys enjoy the journey with us on Night Shift Delirium. Our next episode will be up soon. Follow us on Twitter at Night Shift Delirium and on Instagram at Night Shift Delirium. And stay tuned for the rest of the season.